Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
The energy revealed. Brooklyn to Queens, reppin' both hoods. Rob and CP, keep it fire, misunderstood. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline greens, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. Rob hype on the mic, CP's the fire spark. Together they ignite, voices like the park. Fans drift in jerseys, legacy bold. The Metropolitan story forever told. Turnstile spinning, the crowd floods the gates. This is family, no time for debates. Crack of the Batman, the roar never fades. Queens in the blood, it's how champions are made. Cheer 'em all loud, let the anthem flow. Mets fans unite at the pregame show. From city stand lights to the skyline gleams, it's the heartbeat of Queens, the craziest dreams. 7-line swagger, vibes electric and wild. Mets legacy golden since I was a child. Orange crushed skies, let the battle ignite. Ride for the home team till the last fight.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the Amazing Mets pregame show right here on our channels and on X. As the New York Mets won another game 5-1 to make their record 11-5, and they're playing extremely well. And another good pitching performance by Mets pitching, but it's not about the win today. It's not about the record. It was about the Juan Soto comments, and we will definitely get into that. But we'll say what up to Chris first. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, it should have been about the win. It should have been about the win, right? But, unfortunately, New York is blessed with, baseball media doing what they do. The radio guys also taking over, putting in their 2 cents that nobody really asked for. And the Juan Soto comments really have made the headlines today. And that was all I saw on social media. Forget the fact that the Mets are 11-5, right? Who cares about that going into game 17? Have an opportunity to go ahead and win your 5th straight series. Let's talk about, the differences between how Juan Soto feels in the Mets lineup versus the Yankees lineup. And I don't really think he meant it like that, but that's what's being driven right now.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes all together with the Andy Martino basically, sit down with Juan Soto during spring training or during sometime this year, whenever it was, and having all those questions and the quote unquote missing Judge, having Judge behind him, missing the Yankees and having Judge behind him. I don't think his comments, if you really want to look at it, yeah, they were true, but who cares? So what, right? We know he's not the best speaker in front of a reporter. We all know that. He isn't the guy the Met reporters are going to go to when things are going bad for the team or in general, right? That's why you got Lindor for it. That's why you got Nimmo. That's why probably you got Pete Alonso at this point. So I don't take it as anything else except the reporters were trying to dig something out of Juan Soto because, he had a hoodie on his head. He looked like he was, upset. Okay. So what? He hasn't had a great start to the season. You know what? Would you rather him be smiling? If he was smiling and acting all goofy and stupid while struggling, they would have got on him for that. So now that he's pissed off and mad and doesn't look happy, well, what do you want from him? That's what I don't understand, right? The whole point is that the fact that they're pitching around Juan Soto, quote unquote, if that's what people believe, then isn't that benefiting Pete Alonso, who is stepping up to the plate? Why isn't that a story? I just don't get it. And you know what? This all involves Andy freaking Martino, and I'm sick and tired of that freaking fool. One of the worst reporters in baseball, and he gets away with it. And because SNY is owned by the Wilpons, and it's kind of not technically the Mets network because they talk about the Yankees, go on the Yes Network and let them tell you about the Mets because they don't talk about them at all unless they're talking about the day of the game that they played and they're talking about scores. That's what I don't like. why aren't we talking about the positive here? And Andy Martino, when the Mets are going right, never talks positive about the Mets. He has to bring in something negative to have people go up in awe and go crazy.
But the thing is, this is not just Andy Martino as well. We got to hold these radio personalities accountable as well for the BS that they spew. I mean, I get it that their radio, no offense, really is kind of like a dying sort of media in today's day and age. But, they need to get everything going for them to sort of make it a big deal and get it about the ratings, as Joel is saying right here in the comments section, which is completely true. I understand all that, but what a non-story to try to push. But again, this is what they do best. And I agree also with Oliver in the chat, and I appreciate you all coming in here with your thoughts and opinions on this. I think that this was more so a compliment to Aaron Judge than it was, this diss that everyone is trying to make it be about Pete Alonso and how Pete Alonso is, batting over 300 at 330, right? An over 1100 OPS to begin the season, and he's not enough protection based off of these comments. That's not at all what he was trying to say. Now, there is some factual information about Juan Soto potentially being pitched to differently. And let's face it, at face value, Pete Alonso still, even with as great of a season as he's having, is not Aaron Judge. I think that most Mets fans that are reasonable and objective would openly admit that and happily admit that, right? Because it's true. And so it makes sense that opposing pitchers are pitching him different. I think Will Salmon came out with a great statistic and stating that with runners on for Juan Soto, he is seeing only 16% of pitches in the heart of the zone. And that is, I think, by far the least percentage of any major league batter that's qualified with the amount of at-bats this season so far. So this is a 16-game sample size that we have to work with. Juan Soto is drawing a lot of walks. That's naturally going to happen in the two-hole. I've said it all along. If you're batting Juan Soto 2, expect him to walk a lot of times, especially if Francisco Lindor doesn't get on in that first inning. And that's kind of what we've been seeing transpire. Is he taking his best at-bats? Does he look the most comfortable up there? Objectively, no. But we're talking about 16 games. So, with the performance, if Juan Soto was taking more comfortable at-bats, let's say if he was batting 300, let's say if he had 5 to 6 home runs already, this comment would not have gained this much traction. But the fact that he hasn't looked his most comfortable only adds fuel to the fire. And I'm going to say this, and I've said it all along. If you are counting, right, on Juan Soto not figuring this out, and you are putting this narrative into existence, whoever you are, radio personalities, Andy Martino, New York Post people, I don't care. You are going to look like a fool come a couple of months when Juan Soto gets back to the version of Juan Soto that we know. You're going to look like a fool.
And Chris, this is where I'm going to give you credit, because when we did our season preview, and even during the off season, once we got Juan Soto and we were talking about lineups, you talked exactly what the pitchers are doing with Juan Soto and why you didn't want Juan Soto in front of Pete Alonso, right? I mean, it kind of worked out at the end when it comes to Pete Alonso just playing extraordinary great right now. But we talked about this, that they're not going to pitch to Juan Soto early in the season because they want to get to Pete Alonso. Now, Pete Alonso has, completely shut them all up and kind of basically dominated the start of the season. So we knew this. We talked about they weren't going to pitch to Juan Soto a lot, and they were gonna try to make Pete Alonso beat them. And that's exactly what's happening. So I don't this should be the strategy, right? Has Juan Soto played great? Absolutely not. He's far from it, right? Has he been terrible? No, right? He's surprisingly been better defensively than some people thought. And offensively, though, he's doing what a two-hitter is supposed to be doing. And Pete Alonso, who's in a run-producing part of the lineup, is doing his job. So there's no negative here. That's what I just don't understand. Do we want Pete Alonso to show what he showed yesterday, hitting that home run, get some insurance runs, right? Looking better at the plate? Yes, of course. We need more from Juan Soto. We absolutely do. But it's not hurting this team. It's actually benefiting the team because early in the season, Pete Alonso has been one of the best players in baseball, if not the best player in baseball, just with overall numbers. That is no mistake. That is no lie. Again, this is the same thing, right? Salicata and WFAN are best friends with Andy Martino, so he's not going to say a bad word about him. He's going to bring up that report. He's going to bring up what the comments from Juan Soto, and then the Andy Martino sit-down interview with Juan Soto. He's going to bring that up because that's his friend. They work on SNY together. So, like, and then it just engulfs WFAN because, again, the dying part of sports, talking about sports is the radio. Right, they're the one that basically is still standing, so they have to have big stories to actually, have some news about them and focus in on them. Like, it is the same thing over and over again. And and of course, other reporters are going to pick it up. Mike Puma wrote about it as well. And again, he's another one. Again, it's all these dying reporters that are on their last legs that nobody cares about. Right, the only reason why they're still a thing is because they talk about them on the radio. And, they're like ancient reporters at this point, right? This isn't the old days when, everybody used to pick up a newspaper on the way to work or on the way to school or coming home, whatever. It's not the same anymore. So they got to have something out there on social media that is clickbait, and it's going to fire up a Mets fan base because you're going to get it from all angles, from the Yankee fan, from the radio host, from this and that. And then Mets fans are going to react because we're fans. We react. It's completely ridiculous what's going on here. And last year, they couldn't wait to do every negative thing about them because they weren't doing well. Now that they're actually they're top 5 in baseball record-wise, they haven't lost a back-to-back game yet. And we're talking about this nonsense. If this is the only way to try to bring down a team that is playing well, then good try, because it's not going to work. And it's clear, right? I hope this even motivates them more, if that can even be possible, because they're playing so well. So at this point, I don't care. And they need to be talking about what the Mets are doing and why Alonso is so good. And because Juan Soto is getting pitched around, which the numbers say they are, it's benefiting Alonso. Where is that story? It's so annoying.
I was gonna say, Rob. I mean, I tweeted this out. I just used a little bit of like a Looney Tunes gif with the guy counting some money, and Pete Alonso has to get some nice things for Juan Soto, if not like a steak dinner, because the payday that he is going to get, in the offseason because of Juan Soto is astronomical. And that is how good Juan Soto is that, regardless of how, he's being pitched to, and regardless of what his actual output is, he is making other players better in this lineup by default. And I think that should definitely be the storyline. But anywho, we got a game today and we had a game yesterday. And unfortunately, both of us were not available for the post game. We will be live for the post game tonight. So I want to do a little bit of a recap of yesterday's game before we get into game 17 today.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to, because I see people in the comments saying about Griffin Cannon. He is scratched for tomorrow's game because he's sick. No injury, no physical injury. He's just sick. So it's not nothing crazy, guys. So I just wanted to bring that up. I see people in the comments saying Cannon injured. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Because this just happened. So before, while we were live. So obviously we're not trying to look down on our phones, but I wanted to look really quick just to get some info. So Griffin Cannon's not pitching tomorrow because he's sick. No physical injury at all. So we're ready to go. And yeah, let's talk about the game where we can actually win another series, right? Tyler McGill on the mound. ERA-wise, he's been the better pitcher out of everybody, which is, it is crazy, but he's done this before early on in the season. Let's see if he can continue to be consistent. It's going to be another cold day in Minnesota. I mean, it looked like people were just so sad in Minnesota yesterday. I actually felt bad. Like I was warm in the room. I was like, damn. And it's
at
cold.
least it's in the 50s today. I think in Minneapolis it's in the 50s. Yesterday it was only in the 40s, so that's a step up.
like who would have thought that their football team plays indoors, but their baseball team plays outdoors? Like, it's just so stupid. But again, hey, not our city, but it is what it is. The lineup today, I don't know if that caught your eye or caught my eye, but Starlin Marte DHing against a right-hander. Now, that kind of surprised me a little bit, even though I like when Starlin Marte starts a game because I think he's more involved in the game and he hits better while starting a game. He's just not a good pitch hitter at all, coming cold off the bench. I was a little shocked. I thought Winker was going to get the start. I mean, maybe Winker is still, he was still dealing with something. Maybe he's dealing with it again, because it is a little shocking to see a righty on the mound and Marte cleaning up, which, anything to get Brandon Nimmo out of the cleanup spot, I'm very excited about. So I'd rather have Marte there than Nimmo any day of the week. But Luisano Acuna getting some more playing time, deservingly well. Playing time, which is nice to see. We love him in this 9 spot. We all know that. We talked about that. If he's playing, he should be in that 9 spot. He's dynamic in that 9 spot. It works so much. And Winker has flu symptoms. Oh, see. So it's going around the clubhouse. So that's the unfortunate thing, and kind of makes sense with them going with different types of weather. It's gonna roll over and just go through the team, probably, like it always does in sports teams. Tyron Taylor obviously playing, right? We know the Jose Siri situation, which he's going to go on the IL probably in a day or two. I'm assuming soon, and it's probably going to be Jeff McNeil. But what are your thoughts on the lineup as a whole, and were you shocked when we saw Marte in the lineup?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see anything about Winker in terms of those flu symptoms, but if that's the case, then it definitely makes sense. I mean, he didn't really look particularly great last night, taking the 0 for 2 strikeouts. So, maybe he's dealing with something. But, even beyond that, it just seems like we've seen this before. Starling Marte starting versus the righty, over Jesse Winker so far early in this season. And maybe, Carlos Mendoza is just trying to get a little bit more run out of Marte right now to see how he's going to hold up. I mean, last year wasn't particularly great. Last couple of seasons haven't really been particularly great with the injury status of Marte. But if they feel like he's fully healthy, maybe trying to ramp him up a little bit more quickly. Although you can make the opposite argument, stating that it'd make more sense to just kind of dial it down a little bit until the mid months. But it doesn't really matter how you draw it up. The only thing that I don't like about this is that I just don't like Starling Marte in the cleanup spot. I know that you don't like Brandon Nimmo in the cleanup spot. I don't like Starling Marte in the cleanup spot for obvious reasons. Marte has zero power to him. That is a position in a lineup where you're going to get opportunities to drive runners in. Marte can do it via the single, maybe even via the double, but Brandon Nimmo, even though his approach has not been quite exquisite this season, at least he has the home run ball working for him in the early goings. I mean, he's on pace for what? I guess late 20s, maybe in the early 30s in the home run category. So, I understand the frustration with Nimmo because the strikeouts are just accumulating for him as well, which is infuriating a lot of people, including myself. But, it really is more of a, I guess, not knock, but a little bit more of a statement on, I guess, how Carlos Mendoza views Nimmo and Vientos's lack of success. And it was really good to see Mark Vientos, by the way, yesterday break through with an RBI extra base hit, ends up scoring in that inning as well. But, the Mets lineup objectively hasn't started clicking on all cylinders just yet. So the fact that they're 11-5 is still awesome to see. There's a lot of improvements to be had, but you also have the right, left, right combination there with 4, 5, and 6. So there's a lot of things about, why maybe Mendoza made this decision with Marte. But in any case, right? In any case, um, Luis Angel Acuna, seeing him in that 9 hole, it gets me excited, man. And honestly, he deserves, he should be talked about more at this point, right? Forget about Juan Soto's comments. Let's talk about Luis Angel Acuna. Finally starting to see some life and production out of the second base position when we were kind of like, okay, these guys are producing defensively, but who's going to start hitting the baseball first to get that edge in playing time? Well, it's been Luis Angel Acuna. 4-game hit streak, 6 base hits in the last 4 games. He is on another level, and I'm noticing that, again, he's not expanding the zone as of recent. He's not trying to swing out of his shoes. He is putting decent contact on the baseball, and when you do that with his speed, you're going to go ahead and get hits more often than not, even if they're infield hits. But he's been driving the baseball into the outfield, maybe even the gaps for extra base hits, which has been really, really good. And that speed plays, Rob, especially with the Jose Siri injury, right? If there was any doubt that maybe Luis Angel Acuna goes down or maybe Brett Beatty goes down, when McNeil gets back, it was kind of a 50-50 toss-up, especially before Luis Angel Acuna started hitting. But also now that you're not going to have Jose Series speed, off the bench for the next 3 to 4 months, that's a perfect guy right there. I know that maybe he's not going to get consistent enough at bats unless Mendoza makes the conscious decision to play him in center field on a platoon basis with Tyrone Taylor, because let's be honest as well, Tyrone Taylor is not supposed to be an everyday outfielder, right, in center field. He's more of a platoon type player anyways, but that's the speed you need on this team no matter what, even in late game situations. So at this point, even when McNeil comes back, I'm kind of inclined to believe that Brett Baty is going down and this experiment's going to be over until maybe at some point later this season he gets another shot, another opportunity. It's going to take a mountain to move in order for that to happen, right? With injuries or whatever else the situation may be. But that's kind of what I'm hearing right now, or at least assessing right now.
Yeah, I mean, Mendoza trusts Tyrone Taylor to be on the bench and come off the bench. Worst case, right? Worst case scenario, right? He don't mind Tyrone, and he said it, right? He trusts Tyrone Taylor. If Tyrone Taylor doesn't play 4 days in a row, he doesn't worry about him because he can call upon him. He's not going to make a fuss. He's going to be a professional. So if to have Acuna on his team and with McNeil back, Acuna's got to play center field. I would think so. Like, why sit him over Tyrone Taylor? I think a lot of people would say, you know what? Now, Acuna has played center field in the minors. I don't know anybody has really reported how he played there. I guess you can find something. So I'm not going to say either way if he's good or bad, because that's not fair to him, because I don't know. Right? We would have to find a report about him. But we know he's played there in the minors a decent amount. So we know he can do it. He has the speed to do it. So that's one thing. Can he do it? Mendoza the other day when Siri got hurt, basically told Acuna, hey, listen, we might need you in center field. And obviously Acuna is going to be cool with it because he's going to be playing. But if McNeil is going to be here over the next couple of days, Acuna's got to play center field, right? I know, we all love Tyrone Taylor, but he does get exposed when he plays every day, right? He still puts professional at-bats, but I think he's so much good of a player playing sporadically and coming off the bench for defensive purposes or maybe a bat late in the game. I think he's so much better as a player doing that. As an everyday player, he gets somewhat exposed on the offensive front, and that's okay because you don't Tyrone Taylor isn't the best hitter in the world. Now, he was clutch last year for us, and he had a couple of big hits already this year. But overall, we know we can trust Tyrone Taylor if he's on the bench playing twice a week or coming off the bench when we need him. So I think that's going to be the case. I think you're going to see Acuna play center field and see how it goes. Now, if Acuna doesn't look good at center field, then you have to adjust. Then you have to figure out ways to put Acuna in the lineup when McNeil comes back. So again, it's a good problem to have, right? There's so many times over the years where we don't know who to play at certain positions because nobody's good. And it's finally great to see somebody stepping up at the second base position when we said, hey, can Baty step up or Acuna stepped up? Because somebody's got to show something. Somebody's got to prove it. And Acuna is doing it right now. And credit to him. He's doing it right now. And again, never take him out of the 9 spot. If he's playing, please put him in the 9 spot every single day if he plays every day. So interesting lineup. And I do disagree with you with the Starlin Marte situation. I know he's not a power hitter. Right. But I'd rather somebody put the bat on the ball. And I think Nimmo just strikes out way too much. And with Soto getting on, finding ways to always get on. And Alonso, who, when he doesn't hit a home run, he's hitting balls in the gap. He's getting on base as well. I'd rather have a guy that hits a single up the middle than a guy in Nimmo that if he doesn't hit a home run, he strikes out. So, and Nimmo doesn't hit home runs with people on base. And he's already hit 4 solo home runs this year. So I'd rather have the guy that hits the base hit and gets that, RBI single than Brendan Nimmo either not, moving the runners over or striking out. I think it's just his approach just sucks. I just don't like the way Nimmo plays anymore. And honestly, put him 8th. Like that's how much he annoys me. He really annoys me at this point. It's frustrating because he's so much of a better hitter than that, and everybody knows it except for him apparently. So I would like to have Nimmo because Nimmo would fit the profile at this point the way the lineup looks, Chris. But it's not intuitive to what we actually need right now, because he's a strikeout home run guy, and the home runs don't come with people on base. He just doesn't do it right now. And he's terrible at runners in scoring position and runners on base. That's why I'd rather have him out and give me a singles hitter in Marte, especially when Vientos isn't going right yet. If Vientos was going right, we would have our cleanup hitter. Right now, we just don't have one.
Yeah. Sorry, I was kind of like looking up some stuff. I was trying to find the report of Luis Angel Acuna as you were talking about playing center field, but I didn't really see any pieces from Mets reporters surrounding his time in center field. All I could find was that he played the most games in center field last season when the Mets were trying to get him more experience there. He played 31 total games there, or at least appeared in 31 total games in center field, and he made 2 errors there. So don't really know much else besides that. Maybe I can, find something and dig up something in terms of a report, but kind of also annoying that wasn't at least reported. But you listen, Starling Marte, I mean, sure, I guess you can say that. But again, also Starling Marte has had strikeout issues so far early in the 2025 season. I mean, I understand that he only has 26 at bats. I mean, he's only appeared in 10 games with this platoon that the Mets are deploying, but Marte is a frustrating hitter to me because I just don't know what type of like consistency we're going to get from him playing at this platoon, in this platoon, right? And to your credit, you've been saying that when Marte's playing with consistent at-bats, he's playing consistent games, he can definitely be a great asset to this lineup, but I just don't know if the Mets are at liberty at this point to go ahead and do that, given the injury concerns. It would be nice for him to be in the prime of his career and playing consistent games. But I mean, listen, 26 at bats, he's striking out at a rate of 28%. So in his 26 at bats, he's struck out almost 8 times. So the strikeout issues are still a little bit there with Starling Marte, to be honest.
Yeah, but here's the issue though. It's not a platoon because Winker is not hitting. That's why Marte's in the lineup, right? If it was a full-blown platoon, Winker would be in the lineup today. But again, Winker's not hitting. And at least Marte's putting better at bats than Winker. I mean, Winker swings at everything. He doesn't do anything productive at this point. And Marte at least shows signs, obviously he doesn't have the same speed he had a couple of years ago, but he could still beat out a ground ball. He could still, he just puts better at bats together. And I think that's why he's playing. And that's the thing. Like if Winker was playing, the platoon would be more of okay, that makes sense. But again, I'd rather have Marte playing. And I don't think injury is a concern because he's only DHing. If he was playing the field, I would be extremely worried. Like if he was playing left field, or let's say he was playing right field, let's say Juan Soto's not here or whatever, and Winker and Marte would be the right field platoon, I would be very nervous to have Marte in the outfield because he's DHing. I don't think the injury concern is there as much as he playing 9 innings in right field.
Well, outside of him getting hit by just almost a lot of pitches.
Yeah.
But, but hindsight's always 20/20. But this situation right now, going into the season, this is exactly why we were talking about Alexander Canario so much, and he would have been a perfect sort of piece to this, in this organization, had they not had traded him. But of course, they had to put him on waivers, and he wouldn't have cleared waivers anyway, so they ended up trading him for cash to the Pirates organization. Boy, he would have been such a perfect fit. But to be honest, if I had to make one move, and this is game 17, so I'm just being a stickler here. I understand, Mendy's going to make the lineup. We all trust in Mendy. This lineup should be able to get it done, right? This lineup, any variation of it should be able to put up runs, against Bailey Ober. And let me just knock on wood real quick, because I know that sometimes the Mets offense has been inconsistent. They scored 5 runs yesterday. We'll see what they do today. But, they should be scoring runs even if Marte's in the cleanup spot. But to be honest, if I had to make one move, it'd just be switching Luis Torrens and Starling Marte, because that is a true singles hitter at this point who's finding consistent success in Luis Torrens. So maybe a little bit of, a promotion, right, into the top 5 if you really needed it to be, which the Mets have rolled with here. That would have been it. But you know what? Who cares? Marte, get it done. He's going to have a multi-hit game, knowing that I'm saying this right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like Torrens would probably be the best guy to bat fourth. at this point because he's just been clutch, right? Other than Alonso, he's been our best consistent hitter so far this year, and he just continues it, which is crazy. All right, so we talked about the lineup. The pitching matchup today obviously is Ober and McGill. Again, McGill has been really good. He had a little bit of a interesting start last time out, but again, he's getting it done. He's just doing his job at this point, and we'll see how it is. It's a little bit warmer. It's a little sunnier in Minnesota today, so I guess that's a positive. What do you expect from Tyler McGill today? We know the stuff is there. It's all about him having control over his pitches. If he starts walking the ballpark, that's when he really gets into trouble. It seems like that fifth inning is kind of his, kryptonite, which it seems like it's a lot of pitchers nowadays. But, what are your thoughts on Tyler McGill today against this struggling Twins lineup?
Replicate everything Clay Holmes did in the first 4 innings and don't do what he did in the 5th inning, with the walks, right? I mean, this Twins, I almost threw a fit when Clay Holmes was doing what he was doing yesterday in that 5th inning. Multiple walks. He limited the damage and he was able to get through the 5th inning, which was awesome. But at one point they had bases loaded, nobody out, with the Mets clinging on to a 1-0 lead. And I was like, dude, I understand it's cold. I understand that you can probably not, you're not getting a good grip on the ball, but this lineup isn't good that you're facing. And you've been cruising through the first 4 innings. So it really is, especially for Tyler McGill, taking a look at his last outing and maybe some of the Clay Holmes early outings, is like cruising their way through the first couple of innings and then just hitting this roadblock, whether it be in the 4th or 5th inning. And I think that if they're able to get over that hurdle, and they don't even have to do anything spectacular. Although Clay Holmes was working the strikeouts yesterday, he had 8, right? There are multiple occasions. I think Griffin Canning is a really good example of not needing to strike out and produce heavy strikeouts in order to be successful. Inducing weak contact generally is what the Mets rotation has been good at doing. The batting average against, I said it in my video that I posted earlier around 11 a.m. today. If you missed it, the link's going to be in my description. If you missed it, go to my channel, check it out. But, I was looking at where the Mets rotation ranks in the entirety of baseball right now, and batting average against, it's like they're ranked 8th. You know what I mean? So opposing hitters aren't really having that much success off of the starting rotation. It's just been about the innings pitched, which is what David Peterson has been saying. It's been about, what you've been saying as well, about trying to get deeper into the ball games, because they rank 21st in terms of total innings as a rotation. And that could get better even if they get into the middle of the pack. So, they're looking really good. And I understand that people are, and going into the season, we're very worried about this rotation, especially with the way that it was looking on paper, but they've held up their end of the bargain, from the way that I assess things in the first 16 games of this season. If you're starting to give a little bit more consistent, 5-inning outings, maybe 5 1/3, 5 2/3. We've been really blessed a couple of times recently with David Peterson, Kodai Senga actually getting through the 6th, which is awesome. And I'm sure the bullpen appreciates it. It's about that. So Tyler McGill has the stuff to strike hitters out. I have no doubt about that. We've seen it, but he doesn't really need to. If he gets into a little bit of a jam, go back to your bread and butter, whatever pitch that may be in that particular outing, and just pitch to contact, let the defense do the work for you. I mean, you've got a tremendous up the middle defense with Tyrone Taylor in center field, and now having Luis Angel Acuna and Francisco Lindor up the middle. That should inspire a lot of confidence with these pitchers. So it really is about just getting over that hump, so to speak, and getting over that wall that seems to be hitting the Mets pitchers in a particular inning.
Yeah. And again, you want the Mets starting pitching in innings pitched in the middle of the pack, right? You don't need to be top 10. Just give me 15th or 16th. Right now you're 23. It's got to be a little bit better. But, it was nice to see Clay Holmes get out of it, because I think Mendoza was this close to taking him out. And that would have been a disappointment, the way Clay Holmes was pitching, because he was pitching very well. And it was nice to see. And you saw it after he got out of that inning, he gave a fist pump to the glove because he knew how important that was. And again, he wouldn't have liked this outing if he couldn't get out of that inning. So that was a great job by Clay Holmes, doing what he needed to do to get out of that inning. And that's nice to see. But it does seem like again, Senga did it, Peterson did it, but the Griffin Cannons, the Tyler McGills, when they get to that fifth inning, or Clay Holmes for that matter, something happened. It's like they get tired like that. And especially with Clay Holmes yesterday, it looked like he got tired yesterday. And he was like trying to rear back to find every bit of burst of energy he had left. And that concerned me a little bit, and that has been consistent through his couple of starts to start the season. And hopefully, that stamina moves up a little bit and gets better. But that is concerning to me. That is going to worry me. But I mean, it's just nitpicking at this point, and because again, Clay Holmes pitched very well yesterday, and when he started to get a little bit wild and was starting to, it looked like he was going to implode. He didn't, so that's a good thing, and hopefully he builds off of that. And with Tyler McGill, look, you're right about that. He needs to pitch a little bit more to contact, because I think his pitch count hurts the fact that he strikes out guys, and guys he has swing and miss stuff. So again, it's kind of a blessing, and it's a blessing, but it also could be a downfall, because he might not be able to go deeper into ball games because he has strikeout type stuff. But again, you pitch to contact. Look, the other day, Kodai Senga had 3 strikeouts, in his 7 innings. Like, that was good. So that's what I'm not saying that Tyler McGill has to, shy away from swings and misses, but weak contact, like you said, develop a couple of ground balls, get the job done that way as well. You stay in the game longer, with your pitch count being longer, but he does have to stay away from that 25 plus pitch inning. That has been something that has been a problem with most of the Mets pitching. They got stuck in it 1 inning where they throw 25 pitches. I mean, the Mets offense has been great in making other teams' pitchers throw 25 plus pitches in it, and the Mets got to get away from that a little bit. It's not easy, but if they do that, I can see them going deeper in the game just by throwing a little less pitches in one of those innings, and it might help them get through another inning. But overall, they've been outstanding. Tyler McGill, this is a lineup that has a lot of strikeout potential. Let's be honest about that. He's probably going to have a decent amount of strikeouts today, and I wouldn't be shocked if he pitches well again. And again, he should dominate this lineup. This lineup is I can't believe how bad the Twins are. Like, they're usually a good regular season team until they face the Yankees in the postseason, but they look terrible. I mean, offensively, they just look, it's embarrassing. Like, it's really bad. I mean, I know it was cold yesterday, but if there was it didn't even look like there was 2,000 people in that ballpark, and half of them were Met fans. So, it shows you how much that town and that city, that's a big sports town. And I was there last year in Minnesota. It was awesome. And the fan base is rabid. They're not appreciating this team at all. And they shouldn't, because they're playing terrible right now.
I mean, and even I saw on MLB Network the other day, they were talking about the quote unquote, I guess, load management of Byron Buxton and Carlos Correa as well. And if I guess DeRosa was agreeing with that or not. I don't really pay attention to Twins baseball, to be honest with you, at all. But yeah, I mean, that's not a good lineup on paper with what they're throwing out right now, and they're underperforming, naturally 5-12. So, the fans aren't going to show up, especially in that cold weather. It's you put a decent product on the field, the fans are going to show up. I think everybody knows that. The Mets fans know that all too well, right? And it's been a huge talking point in the offseason and early season, etc. So, shout out to Oliver saying that former Met, by the way, last season, Harrison Bader is in the lineup against the Mets tonight. I think he's batting 9th, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see an old familiar face right there. But yeah, and I think the other thing that we need to talk about is the Jose Siri situation further, because, and not just that, but just the overall reinforcements coming back on the way. Drew Gilbert also is going back up to AAA. So you take a look at multiple different options if you really want to put a true solidified center fielder on this roster. Between I don't want to say Azocar is a true center fielder, right? But he's outfield depth insurance if they want to go the veteran route. Drew Gilbert is not quite ready, I would assume. So that's probably the least likeliest of scenarios, even though I like Drew Gilbert a lot. If you listen to me talk about Mets prospects, you know that I'm a big fan of Drew Gilbert, and he's been heating up. And he's finally in his St. Lucie, I guess, rehab assignment, and he's finally going back up to AAA. So hopefully he finds continued success there, because I do think at the end of the day, if Drew Gilbert is able to show a good enough sample size of games over the next month or two, especially while Jose Siri is still on the shelf dealing with that fractured tibia, I think Drew Gilbert has plenty of a shot to get called
Oh,
up
yeah.
and be one of those first prospects to crack the roster, especially if Tyrone Taylor's offensive, I guess, efficiency and offensive output still is a little bit lacking, like it has been to begin this season. Now, Tyrone Taylor's not going anywhere. I mean, his defense alone and the speed alone is going to, keep him on the roster, let alone the fact that the Mets have control of that contract for a couple more seasons. But, you know, what is trying to find the best lineup possible, the best personnel possible. So far, you struggled with offensive output from center field and second base. You're slowly starting to get more production from second base. Who can fill in and give you a little bit more offense in center field alongside Tyrone Taylor? I think that's what the Mets are trying to assess right now. Uh, a lot of good discussions being had, especially what happens with Beatty Acuna when McNeil gets back. I think Sanger is the obvious trade-off for Francisco Alvarez at this point of the roster, at this point of the season. But the Mets are going to be making moves, parallel moves, because this roster with the guys coming back, it needs a shakeup. So that's curious to me what they're going to do, especially trying to replace the Jose Siri roster spot. And I don't think it's going to happen in this series. So I don't think we're going to see that news until the Cardinals series when the Mets go
At
back
home.
home. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I do agree. And David Stern is not afraid of making roster moves just to improve the team. And you know what? A lot of people were down on Drew Gilbert last year. It was injuries as well. That was a major thing. But the talent is there. You see it already. He's healthy. He's talented. And again, he is a true center fielder. So, and when the Mets did get him from Houston, that was probably one of the big talking points in about Drew Gilbert. If he can, project to be the guy that they expect him to be, he can be a future center fielder. I think all the signs were that Nimmo was going to left field eventually anyway. It just happened a lot sooner than the Mets wanted to. But, if Drew Gilbert could continue his success and go to AAA and continue that success, I would not be shocked by like June.
Yeah.
You might see him because, again, when you get closer to the trade deadline, you got to figure out what you're going to do with these prospects. I know that's, I know we got a little bit annoyed yesterday. I think it was Easy who talked about the trade deadline and who we need to get. But you got to start figuring out what you're going to do if Drew Gilbert's going to be a part of this roster and a part of this team in the future. You have to know that because you can't be, still evaluating prospects when you need to try to make deals if that's going to be the case when the Mets get to the trade deadline. But I think if Gilbert's going to come up, it's probably going to be sometime around June. And again, Siri's not going to be here for probably the end of the year, maybe.
August. Yeah,
exactly.
at the minimum.
Yeah. So it's going to be a while. So that opens up an opportunity for Drew Gilbert. If he continues his success, you would have another very good defensive center fielder, plus a better bat than anybody else you have in center field. And with the zero that you're technically getting from center field, it would be a big positive if Drew Gilbert continues that success in the minors.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this right now. We were having this discussion, especially when I first started, doing this YouTube stuff about who our favorite prospect was, in the 2023 season, right? Because I started my channel back in 2023 at the beginning of that season. And, Jet Williams is getting a lot of hype. Other prospects were getting a lot of hype at that time. And I was just like, Drew Gilbert, Mets acquiring him at that deadline alongside Ryan Clifford. And I was like, he can be a true five-tool player. He can be. He can play the corner outfield position if you really need him to. But he also, with his speed, can cover a lot of ground and has a pretty decent arm, from what I assess, to be a center fielder. And so I think that I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't know who's going to be protected, in this organization in terms of prospects versus who isn't in the eyes of David Stearns. But I think one prospect that they're not going to part ways with, given the outfield situation of this team and the lack of depth with it. And as I'm not sure who is saying he's not depth. I think it's Zero in the chat. Yeah, he's a major leaguer, and I don't think of Drew Gilbert as just outfield depth. So
No, no,
the
no, no, no.
potential there with him, we don't like to use the word untouchable. I get it. A lot of people say that, that's not a word that you should just throw around with these prospects. Maybe you might label Sproat that and whoever else, but I think that Drew Gilbert, given the outfield situation of this organization and who's coming up in the wings of this organization, you might have to label Drew Gilbert, or at least maybe I will label Drew Gilbert as an untouchable prospect in this deadline, if we're looking forward to that far away. But again,
Yeah.
we're very far away from that point.
Exactly. And again, if it's not this year with Drew Gilbert, it's definitely next year getting a chance to be the starting center fielder for the New York Mets. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, again, we can't project the future, what happened at the trade deadline, but if there's somebody you really want, you're not going to stop yourself. If they want Drew Gilbert, you're probably going to have to do it if it's a big piece that you probably need. But that's
Sure.
beside the point. But if you go back to when we made that trade and we got Drew Gilbert, I think you, me, Nelson, and Hayden were live during that time when that trade happened, and we talked about it. We brought up Drew Gilbert, whatever it was. I followed him a little bit in college. I watched him a lot, and I didn't watch him, but I followed him a lot in the minors because he that left-handed swing. I'm a left-hander, so it kind of like I was like, oh man, this guy looks good, and that was the talking point. It wasn't about Ryan Clifford was the higher prospect over Drew Gilbert, but Drew Gilbert just seemed like, oh my God, this is the guy. And we talked about it a couple of years ago when we made that trade, when Gilbert and Clifford came. I was like, yeah, this is the guy. And this was the talking point during that show, whatever show it was. Who the hell knows? We did so many shows since, but it's so definitely yes, but it's really cool. Like, just imagine if we actually had a good season in 2023, we might not have Acuna, we might not have Gilbert or Clifford. I mean, Jesus, that's crazy to think. But
right.
Right
Also, I know that we're approaching game time here in the next 5 minutes, but pretty good news for Ronnie Mauricio as well, especially as we're talking about DH. He's going to be DHing some games here soon, and so he's not out of the realm of possibility in the middle months. If the DH spot is still lacking in terms of production, you'd see Ronnie Mauricio at that point. If there's nowhere for him to play at second base and third base, DH him for all I care. I like that bat as well. So I like to see that positive news, and just him playing in general coming off of that injury. The fact that he is getting on the field in game action is good news, but especially DHing, I think that he is and will be, if he produces in the rehab, assignments and in his tenure in the minor leagues, he'll be a consideration for DH at some point this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as soon as Mauricio is ready to go, he's going to be up on his team. And it doesn't matter who might be sent down, to be quite honest with you. I think Stearns loves Ronnie Mauricio. You can tell that when they talked about him in his last interview about Mauricio, his eyes lit up. Like he knows how talented Ronnie Mauricio is. We all know how talented Mauricio is. Mauricio will be up here once he's 100% and once his rehab stint is basically over and they see he's good enough and healthy enough to be to finish his rehab and just don't waste away in the minors. He'll be up here. So that is great news. Again, it's always good to get healthier with your roster and your depth pieces as well. So, all right, guys. So Mets game's going to start in a couple of minutes. Miguel on the mound. Mets looking for another series win now against the Twins. Let's get them runs scored. Let's win this ball game. Let's talk about it on the post-game show and a win on the post-game show. Chris, any last words?
Let's go win a series and let's spam some W's in the post game. See you all later tonight.
All right, guys. Let's go Mets. See you later tonight, guys, on the post game. Let's go.
Let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies.